Now, the month of June is Pride Month, and it celebrates and remembers the impact that the LGBTIQ plus community has made to create a free, equal and safe environment for all within the community. The month also sees the critical issues and struggles faced by the queer society. And as we wrap up Pride Month, this morning we're in conversation with the founder of the Thami Dish Foundation and the Federal Awards. Thami joins us now via our video line. Good morning. Thanks so much for coming on to the AM report. Pride Month, there's a lot there in terms of challenges that still exist, but perhaps what is there to celebrate? Let's start there.
Wow. Morning, Michelle. I think that years into so many of our struggles as queer people, we're still experiencing a multiple of issues within the space of our growth as a community. Over the years, I think what we do as Pride is that we try and not make it just about, the march itself and being colorful and being represented in our walk, but also for us to be able to table a number of discussions that move from, mental health to labor to inclusion of queer people in various spaces to access of services, to, right through to discussing what's happening on the continent around the criminalization of queer bodies and their existence. So I think what we're seeing now with Pride globally, you must remember it's Global Pride Month, and it's different from what us in South Africa, we celebrated in October. But what we're seeing now in the time of COVID and with all our efforts is that we're uniting and we're coming together and trying to be one voice and one message coming from multiple parts of the world. So, if you look at things like the Trans Lives Matters that jumped onto the Black Lives Matter campaign, it was just to be able to push an agenda or a conversation around the issues that trans humans have everywhere in the world. So we're here now. We have to celebrate it differently. Unfortunately, we can't be marching. We're not in New York. We're not in San Francisco marching, but we've got to connect online and find ways to make our voices heard and our opinions a little bit louder. So yeah, that's where we are.
I mean, Thami, South Africa is still a beacon in many ways when it comes to the treatment of the LGBTIQ plus community, the attitudes just by ordinary people. But on the continent, there are still massive gaps in understanding. And it's not just around understanding. This results in an actual threat to life.
Yeah. I mean, that's why one of my missions, my personal mission and the things and hoping that the rest of the world, kind of feels the same is to be able to get as many votes that, help us decriminalize homosexuality, because I think a lot of people talk about how we can legalize it. And I think legalizing it is a further step. What I'm more concerned with, or what the community is concerned with, is the fact that our existence as queer bodies anywhere in the world should not be a criminal offense. And it remains, a big discussion on the continent. And so it helps also that we have our current president, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, as the chairperson of the African Union, who I often throw at the question around, what's happening on the continent, how many discussions are we having at the African Union, how many votes can we rally, how do we lobby certain individuals everywhere else in the world to try and assist us in achieving that. So it's an ongoing thing. I think it helps us now that everybody else is now making an effort to ensure that we charge some kind of attention to those various countries where it's still an offense, to those various institutions where, we talk about countries only, that kind of treatment is received across, various spaces. One is a country, others they experience it in the workplace, that inequality exists everywhere. So from that front of just like being able to speak about the things that happen on the continent, we're trying to push. South Africa is great. It's got one of the most progressive constitutions, being number 5, top of the numbers of, the Marriage Union Act. And I think that, we need to be able to still be the hope for the rest of the continent. Like I often speak to people and I say, Michelle, when you look at just how queer people have traveled to South Africa, not because South Africa is such a great place, but because they felt safe. And I think they've knocked at our doors and asked us to try and help them and to hear them out, in as much as they've knocked at doors of many other countries. So it's our responsibility, being the hope of the continent, to still try and drive that message. And we're doing our bit to make sure we do that.
But I suppose, Thami, it might in some sense be easier in a way to decriminalize the issues that you've spoken about now, as opposed to changing attitudes. I think that probably is where the bigger challenge lays in many ways?
Look, let me tell you, I think the Constitution is something that needs to be respected. But, culture in various spaces, yes, is something that we need to work on hard. You see what happens in the corporate sector where, trans people have no existence. They're not felt. Gay people don't feel like they have an opportunity for growth in that space. Lesbian people feel like they can't dress like themselves when they go to work. And I think once you are known to be of the LGBTQ community, there's a lot of research says in some way it tends to not support or grow those individuals. I'm happy that in the corporate space, we're looking at a lot of companies who are now developing and working on forums that support queer people's existence in their institutions. You look at it also from a point of just, one of my biggest fights, I say all the time, is the issue around housing. We still have a biggest problem now, especially with COVID-19, where we found that, there weren't enough shelters, but also queer people who had applied for homes long time ago have still not received title deeds in terms of the RGP houses that are assigned to them. And also that's because there's a criteria that's put out. And that criteria creates an exclusion for queer people. So you must be a family, you must have dependents, you must have this. So it will always pull you down to the bottom of the chain, and ultimately not ever being able to access, free housing from the government. So how do we intervene and try and make sure that we start a conversation that allows us to develop a specific program? Unfortunately, we're not going to jump and be like, yeah, we're all inclusive, we're all one. It doesn't work like that. We've tried that and it hasn't worked. So you need to have champions who are sitting in different spaces looking at specific interests in those various departments. You look at things like health. There's been a lot of issues around access of services where health is concerned. Trans humans have been complaining a lot that there isn't enough space or a place for them that feels safe where they can go and take their queer health issues to. Trans humans have been complaining about the fact that, they've been on hormones and they've been trying to transition for the last 15 years, and it takes so much of our time or of their time because we don't have an adequately trained nurses, doctors, specialists who understand the process of transition. So there's a lot that happens there. It's that attitude that you're talking about. So the Constitution, unfortunately, still does or needs to be, respected, and people need to be served with that amount of dignity. But, it's not carried through. It's not a lived experience when you get to the front line and you're like, hi, my name is Thami and I'm here to do this. It's not the same thing. So there's got to be enough training and sensitization that goes through various spaces for our service providers out there, because unless that's done, you're still going to find yourself in a situation where when you go to Home Affairs and you say, hi, I'm Michelle, and they say, but your ID says missing. You're like, hi, I'm Michelle, I'm here to change my gender and my sex, and I'm here to do all of these things. Because, those conversations still, we are having them, and unfortunately we're having them in our own little small corners, and trying to find the right people to always listen to us. But we've got to accelerate that conversation. We've got to push it a little bit harder, because it is becoming a little bit intense for our humans. I know, that many of our queer people complain about just the labor. Why do I always have to educate you on who I am? Why must I have to come here and justify why you need to change my identity card, and from it reading Mr. Thami to Miss Jacobeth or Miss Jessica, whoever I choose to be, So there's a lot that still needs needs to happen. There are many conversations that need to happen. And I'm glad that right now, because of COVID, we've entered into a space where, you know, where we're pushing out as much information as possible. The space in which we operate in is still like, you know, we're often outreach as a community. We're going out to people and we're speaking to them and educating them and making them understand the diversities that's involved here. But now we have to resort to, here we are, we in the time of COVID-19, and we're having webinars, we're having conversations, we're having virtual dialogues, and people can't say anymore that I'm not available, I don't have time. All we ask is an hour of, you know, Michelle's time to listen to us talk about, you know, the fact that mental health is a big issue, you know, and to talk about how you're going to help the fact that COVID-19 has left many of the queer kids and trans children and those who feel uncomfortable being themselves at home, who couldn't go to school, who weren't at work, who lost their jobs, who are in a home where, you know, they were going through like an experience where it felt really uncomfortable because the uncle is homophobic or the aunt is this or the father is that or the mother is this, and there isn't enough support. So it's a lot.
It is a lot, a long way to go still, but I feel a lot of things that we can celebrate as well. Thanks very much for coming on and speaking to us. Thami Dish is, of course, the founder of the Thami Dish Foundation and the Feather Awards, and that's as we wrap up Pride Month, the month of June.